What's up, everybody? I'm Mike, and I'm the vocalist of Boys of Fall, and pretty much from the inception, I have been the band's producer, recording engineer, and mixing and mastering engineer. It was at first kind of started out of like kind of a necessity because, you know, recording is expensive, and it was always something that I was interested in, and it just kind of has worked out like that over time. So I've done pretty much everything with the band from our first EP to Thank You and Goodbye. We did Better Moments with Andrew Wade, so I recorded all the guitars and vocals for that record, and then we did all the bass and drums down in Florida with him, and then he mixed and mastered it. And then I did Distance, and now for our newest single, Almost Happy, I did the mix for that as well, leading into our fourth album. So today I kind of wanted to just go through and basically show you guys kind of how I mixed it. I'm going to do a briefer version, so I'm not going to be like going through and actually finding the EQ spots. I'm going to kind of open up the plugins and just go through and talk about why I made certain choices and kind of the ideas behind certain parts. And then I'll just kind of fill you in on some cool tidbit kind of information, which is a lot of fun. So if we're looking through the song, so I'm just going to kind of play it right from the start. So what I've done is I basically went through and turned off all of the plugins that are used, and this is kind of just the raw things. We bounced, just straight exported the guitar tones that we used from our actual tracking session, just minus EQ and compression and that. And I kind of went through and did basically from there, I started and built this mix. So the idea behind this song was we just wanted just an emotional, powerful, super emo-ass opening to this record. And this isn't going to be the opening of the record, but we wanted, you know, to introduce the record with this song because we just felt it was powerful, and we kind of like to defy expectations a little bit. You know, everybody likes to, you know, they expect a heavy song from us first or whatnot, but we just really enjoy doing this. So I'm going to kind of go through this song and just start showing you guys some cool things. So I'm going to just hit play.
Shades closed in every room. I move slow, can't quite cope with who I see in you. Everything you said ever true. Past year, I've been suffering as I watch love turn paper thin.
Beautiful voice Jake has. So normally when I'm starting a mix, what I do is I'm going to go through and I like to do top-down mixing. So I will start with drums and then move to bass and then guitars and then vocals. For me, it's just the easiest way to get organized, and drums are the foundation of every mix. So it's super important to get those right. So what I do is I start with drums. So I'm going to go through and just mute every other folder. And as I open them and we start mixing them, I'll kind of start to explain different things about them. So don't worry. So all of these tracks, if you see any things that are like random labels, it's because I just duplicated tracks and emptied them, and I didn't have time to go through and relabel stuff. So pardon my organization if that comes up. All right, so I'm going to start with the drums. So what I have going on with the drums, so for this song and for this record, so Distance, a fun fact is we did not record live drums for Distance. All of that was MIDI drums because Bean lived down in Nashville. It was the pandemic. We weren't really able to record live drums and do them at a quality that we felt would have been good enough for the album. So we did MIDI drums for that. We did MIDI drums for Empty. And then when it came around for this stuff, we were just like, no, dude, we're going back to, you know, live drums. So I got the opportunity to record them myself with Bean. So we got to, you know, take full control over every single take of the song and every part. So if I'm just going to play this, and there's going to be certain parts that are like duplicated out, or, you know, there's some certain parts that we have samples. So I'm going to turn off anything that would be listed as a sample for right now. And this is just the live drums raw that we had tracked. We're going to pick it up here. So a lot of cool stuff going on. Once we start adding in the sampled kick, the sampled snare, and the toms, we've got a sound that comes out like this. So it's giving you that extra punch, but there really is like no power or life yet in the drums. And that's what I want to start doing. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to go part by part, and I'm going to like click on the plugins and just kind of show you guys what I would typically do. So starting with the kick, I'm usually going to pick a section that picks up and shows me more of what I want to focus on. So for this song, I mean, the chorus was the super important part. So I'm going to just loop the chorus, and that's what we are going to focus on for the drums right now. So if we start them here. We're starting with this first kick drum. So on this kick drum, I have a virtual mix rack, so I'm using a gate because I want to remove the unwanted noise that I have from the live kick. I've got an EQ on here, and there's definitely some crazy moves going on, but there was just a lot of this just muddiness down here that I wanted to get rid of. The kick needed a lot more slap coming through, and then I'm just getting rid of some of this unwanted sub frequencies. So, you know, once those are on, and then you add a compressor to the kick just to tame it a little bit, it sounds like this blended with everything. And all I'm really looking for out of that is I just want the attack of the live kick drum. You know, most of the oomph and the power is going to come from the sampled kick drum, just because samples offer you a more consistent, powerful sound recorded in amazing studios. And, you know, behind most live drum kits that you ever hear, you'll hear samples. So our goal here was not so much to make the entire tone of the drums based off the samples, but more so to just enforce everything else that was going on. So we have our sample right here, which would be... which I believe is the Get Good Drums Architects kit, but I'm actually not using that sample. What I have here is I'm bringing up Trigger, and I am using this awesome kick drum called Dead Kick. I just love the way that that kick drum sounds, but there's still a lot going on in the kick that we need to get. But like just putting that sample on and then putting it with the other kick drum, you already have a sound like this. So we're starting to get some oomph in the drums, which is super important. That's what we're looking for, because at the end of the day, the drums are going to be powerful regardless of how soft the song is. So after that, I'm bringing up a compressor. I'm adding that onto the kick. I've got an EQ here, so I'm just pulling out some of the unwanted frequencies, and you can like A/B what's going on. Like to me, that EQ just sounds way more pleasant with everything that's going on. It's just taking out some of that muddiness and that like metal slappiness, and it's just adding some nice slappiness to the kick. After that, I'm doing another EQ where I'm just taking off some low end frequencies, and I did remove a little bit of 8K out of here because it just was becoming a little too much. After that, I have a multi-band compressor on here where, again, we're just taming some of that low end for the sub. And then I've got JST clip on here, so I'm just giving the kick a little bit of drive. So all those together... which I think sounds awesome. And if you play the whole kit, it starts to really come together. Awesome. All right, so we're going to go over the snare drum next. So the snare is obviously a very important part of any rock song, and we tried to pick a snare that we liked prior to any sample being added. So Bean went through and picked a couple snares, and we ended up going with this one, which, I mean, just by itself without anything does sound pleasant. And what we're going to start doing is I'm not doing much on this snare. I'm adding a gate to it, and I'm adding a gate to the bottom snare. Just takes a little bit of that unwanted cymbal bleed that's going on. And from there, this is where we're going to start adding some oomph. So I'm actually using 2 different snare sample sets and then a snare room. So we're going to start by adding in the snare sample, which is a part of that, I believe, the dead drum kit. Yeah, it's the dead drum kit that I'm using for the kick as well. And I just love the sound of that snare. And I'm using the dead drum room kit as well because it's just such a full sound. Yeah. And then I've got another snare sample on here. This snare sample is... Okay, so this is the Get Good Drums VK Copper snare, which sounds super just fat and awesome. So all together. And those 2 snares combined mixed with the room. And then adding all of those into the song with all of the plugins turned back on. Well, let's see. So the snare sample that I'm using, this first one, I mean, it definitely needed a bit of love. I have this SSL channel on here where I'm going through, I'm adding a little bit of high end. I'm adding a compressor to it, just a little bit, just a 3-to-1 ratio, just to try to pull some of that down. And then I'm just taking some unwanted frequencies out of the 0.9 range. And then I am also adding a little bit of low end. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in this one. From there, I have another EQ going where I'm just taking out some of the boingy ring in the snare that can get really annoying. I am adding a decapitator after that because that just adds this like punch and saturation to the snare that I really love. And then after that, I'm adding this trans multi, and it's adding this slappy high end to the snare that it really needs. After that, just a clipper just to push the snare and give it some drive. And all together with the other snare and with the room, it sounds like... Awesome. On here, so normally I would use live toms, and for some reason on this song, like the way the cymbals were bleeding into the mics, I just didn't enjoy the overall tone. Every time they came in, it sounded jarring. So sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, and I sampled out the toms. So with these, I went with the Dan Bronstein sample pack, which these toms just sound so beastly. It's so good. So with those in, so good. From there, we're focusing on cymbals. So if I were to just solo out the cymbals, there's a lot going on in the background that we're going to want to take out, but I'm just going to play these with the room mics. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is we're going to want to just use a filter that's just going to take out all of this low end and then just some of this, like the drums like to sit in this 400 frequency range. There's just a lot of muddiness there. So we're going to take it out in the 350 part. And I am adding that just all the way across the cymbals because it needs to go on all of them. The room mics get a little bit of different treatment. That's going up to 423, and there's just a bit of a deeper cut on the low end. But I have those panned left and right because I like stereo rooms. On the cymbals, I have this awesome plugin called Finality. And basically what that does is it's ducking the snare down. So every time the snare hits, the snare is so loud it cuts through the microphones and it'll overpower the cymbals. So this is kind of helping the cymbals have a fighting chance, and it's breaking it over that snare. So just listen to this by itself. Yeah, I mean, it really keeps the cymbals like above everything, because at the end of the day, we want the cymbals to be a little bit aggressive sounding. And then after that, it's just a simple compressor that's added on. I'm just taking, a couple dBs off and really just kind of gluing all the cymbals together. And that is kind of universally applied across all of those. Once we get to the rooms, I did a lot of squashing, because I just like the sound of just cranked, compressed rooms. So without this compressor, you're getting this. And then once you add that compressor, it just brings this whole new life to these rooms. And that may sound super subtle because it's supposed to, but it's filling up this, this part of the drums that just sounds like it's missing when you're, got a sample bass type sound. So all together, when that, is just applied across the board, yeah, like those to me just sound massive. We went from having these dry, kind of very close, mic'd roomy drum sounds to this just massive sound that is supposed to just kind of be that emo anthemic, just big drum sound. When we get into the areas that are the verses, there are these rim clicks going on, which I know is a little bit tough to record, but Bean is just such a tank. He just nails everything. So just by themselves, all I have going on these is just a little bit of EQ, just so I can get more of the rim than I get of anything else. And I will show you what that sounds like by themselves. See, once you EQ that, it just brings this life out, and it just sounds so good. So that's kind of pretty much the drums. I have all of these routing to individual buses. So I'll have a kick bus, a snare bus, a tom bus, overheads, room mics, and parallel compression along with my drum bus. Each of these may have some plugins. Like on my overheads, I'm doing a little bit of like these wispy high sounds that are coming through, and then a little bit that's coming through the kit. I'm taking that out. And then I've also got Valhalla Vintage Verb, because first off, like, it just sounds amazing, and I wanted to give the drums like a bit of room sound, because the room that we recorded them in is super dry. So it doesn't sound like we did them in this big expensive studio, and this is kind of a little trick to make it sound like it. So without it, if I were to just single it out, it just sounds like this. Yeah. So sounds great. Moving on, we get to the bass. So for the bass was a pretty simple type thing. We mostly just wanted the bass in the song to fill up the low end. So I had bounced this. This is technically running through oh my God, what is it called? A dark glass. It's got a dark glass plugin. And we recorded it through a 4-string American Standard Fender Jazz bass. So it's already got the tone on it, and I'm doing pretty much any of the work on the tone on just the bass bus. So on the bass bus, I just have a little bit of EQ where I'm rolling off some of these sub frequencies, and then just these unnecessary high frequencies that the bass isn't hitting anyways. And then I have this plugin called JST Bass, and bus glue bass, and I basically have it parallel compressed because I just didn't want like a ton going on with the bass. It sounded good as is, and I didn't want to mess with it. And I feel like that's where a lot of mixers kind of go off track, is they just hear something and they think automatically, oh, I have to do just a ton of stuff to it to get it to sound good. And it's like, well, no, sometimes Source just sounds good and all it needs is one or two things and you're already there. So all together with the bass, So pretty simple. Moving on to guitar. So for the guitar, we used, I think, 7 different guitars on this song. Dan has an entire arsenal of guitars. And one of the things that we're always big on is we want to figure out what guitar sounds best for the part. And there's like a lot of little things that like poke through the song and like are different things, and the way he plays it just comes across differently. So I printed the tones that were already on it, just raw. What I added later was the compression and the EQ and things like that. But if we bring in these guitars, just for this chorus area right here, we're going to just start with the distorted, and then I'll show you guys the cleans. So the distorted was a plugin called the STL Tonality, and we used the Howard Benson, the red amp. And that thing just sounded so fantastic. It was exactly what we were looking for when it came to like this emo rock crunchy sound. So I'm just going to play that for you. And it really didn't take much. I mean, all I'm doing is I am adding a Renaissance Axe compressor, which is just pulling down some of like the that you're hearing in the song to just kind of even out the guitar at parts. And that's going on both tracks. And then on this guitar bus, there's this awesome plugin that was created by Dan Corniff called the Amplified Instrument Processor. And this thing is so cool because you can do so many things in one plugin. So this is doing a bulk of the work on the guitar bus. So if you listen to it before I like actually turn it on, the difference is crazy. It's just taking out all of those piercing, like just high whistle frequencies that are in the guitar. It's I'm adding, just a little bit of the drops in the, this insufferable mid-range filter. That's a good one. I'm doing the high pass and the low pass filter. So I'm going to around 100, 100. And then here I'm going down to about 10K. Yeah. So that's doing the bulk of the work. And then outside of that, I brought up Pro Q3 just because I'm taking out some more of those little individual whistle parts that I didn't like. And altogether, it's... Yeah, it's crazy what that one plugin does to everything. So we're through a bulk of the main instruments. What I want to get into next is the lead guitar. So like I said, we recorded this song with a lot of guitars, and Dan has a lot of intricate parts. And this was actually kind of cool because this is one of the first songs that like Dan plays most of the rhythms and Jake plays a lot of the cleans. So getting into this lead guitar section, you've got these 2 leads that are popping through. So catchy. And this first lead by itself. So I'm not doing much to it. I'm adding a compressor. From there, I'm adding a little bit of EQ because I'm just taking out the stuff that I don't like. And then from here, I am adding the Archetype Plini. I am only using just the pedals on the end, so I have everything else turned off. And I have just the reverb going. So the reverb was a huge part of this sound. So when you hear it by itself, just adds that emo anthemic rock sound. And for the second lead, we're literally adding the same things. I may have had a delay. No delay on this one. So same type of thing, just the 2 reverbs. And then our favorite part of the song, there's this just straight up Oasis type bend in the background that I'm pretty sure I had the reverb extra cranked on it. Yeah, it's almost all the way up. So this is just a great little part. And then just like the main rhythm guitar bus, I have that amplified instrument processor on there, and then just taking out some more extra notes that I just did not like in the lead guitar, and all together it is. Awesome. So to finish out the guitars, we have all the cleans and then the crunch guitars. So these were obviously very important. So these are Corey Wong, the archetype Corey Wong. Listen, Neural DSP, they just kill it with all of their tones. So, you know, we're huge fans. We use it all the time. So for this, I'm pretty sure just for this rhythm, I am just using the pedal. Yep. So we've got this Corey Wong amp that by itself sounds like. Just super emo, clean guitar tone. Adding that same Renaissance Axe effects, I don't know how to say that, archetype Corey Wong to it, which is basically on this section, we're adding a little bit of a delay, and then we are adding just a little bit of the reverb. So when I put those on there, it's just a huge change. Yeah, I mean, altogether, it just sounds super emo, super beautiful. And then there's this kind of transition that happens once my vocal part finishes and we enter this crunch guitar. And we were doing the same thing. All we did was the Corey Wong, but we added a little bit of an overdrive pedal when I originally bounced this. And then it's same thing. We're just adding that reverb and that compressor to it. And it just kind of switches in just a very beautiful way. So I'm just going to solo out the cleans into the crunches. All together. Yeah, just sounds super beautiful. Now that we're done with the instruments, real quick, I want to jump up to my instrument bus, because all the instruments that you hear are running through a couple things right now. So that's running through my master instrumental bus, and I'm going to give a shout out to Nolly because I definitely stole this trick from him. So on the beginning of the track, we have this Slate virtual mix rack, which is just basically adding high end, little bit of low end, and then a trimmer before anything even happens. And then I have this this bus compressor, which is just super awesome. And basically what it's doing is every time the snare is hitting, it's ducking the snare a little bit, allowing all of the instruments to just kind of glue together. So just sounds so good. And then outside of that, it's running to a mix bus. So just because we're kind of at the point where it becomes very important for everything else, I am going to go through my mix bus and then we'll start jumping to vocals because it's all going to push together and glue together once this is on. So on my mix bus, I have a saturation plugin, which is the Virtual Tape Machines by Slate, because it just sounds beautiful. It just adds this life that is missing without it. I know a lot of mixers are like, oh, don't mix into tape, but it just sounds so good. So like by itself, or you know, without it, it's. And then once I add it on, mix comes alive once the tape machine is added to it. Like it just adds something to it. From there, I have the SSL, bus compressor, which just sounds fantastic. So once you add that on there, it's... And all we're looking to do is kind of glue everything. That's what basically this mix bus is doing right now. After that, I have a multi-band compressor, and just straight up, I just left it right on the track. I just added it, didn't touch it, and it just started to do its own thing. You'll see how it works, and then I'm going to turn it off and, play it for you so you can see it. Super subtle, super important to it, because it's just catching all those little things that, are poking through or trying to fight each other. And then after that, I have this EQ. And this EQ, I'm doing literally nothing on it. But again, this is one of those perceived volume things and perceived enhancements that I don't know why it does that, but it sounds great and it just works. So I'm going to play without it, and you'll hear everything just come to life. I don't know what it does. It just brings everything forward. It gives you this perceived volume boost without actually doing anything. And then from there, I have an EQ going on. So I'm just removing some harsh frequencies. I got something near 4K, 2.3, and then 105. And then I'm just removing some of this unwanted low end. And that's kind of all important to make this just kind of glue together. And just to kind of keep the volume this whole time so we're not listening to super quiet things, I've just left my limiter on, but what I use is invisible limiter, and this thing just sounds fantastic, like without it. That's what's giving me my, CD quality like volume push, so it competes in terms of loudness with everything else. I'm using a little meter just to make sure that I am in the range that I want to be, set to RMS and 1,000. From there, we are going to open up vocals. So obviously, I sing for the band. Jake is the other vocalist of the band, and it was very important to us on this new record to be kind of going through and doing a little bit more of a 50-50 split in terms of vocals, because that's kind of what we do live. So I'm going to take this part by part. So I mean, by itself, I guess we always have, we've always like doubled vocals, and when it comes to choruses, we'll triple vocals, we'll have 2 layers of low octaves, we'll have harmonies, and it's all about when the listener listens to this, like I want them to feel it. It's supposed to have power. So we're one of those bands where it's like, well, we'll record as many layers as it needs to give it that power. So if I'm just starting from the beginning, which is just Jake's vocals, this is with nothing on it. We recorded into a Neumann U87, which is a very gorgeous mic, into a Great River preamp, into a distressor. So the Empirical Labs distressor. So it's definitely got some things going outboard before it ever hits the computer. So just by itself,
shit's closed in every room. I move slow, can't quite cope with who I see in you. Anything you said ever true.
So just to start it, I have this auto tune on here because there's like every once in a while when you're tuning, you just miss notes or just forget things. So I have that on there, and it's just correcting like a certain note or two in there. For the main compressor, I am using what is called Gain Reduction 2. It is a super awesome plugin. And this goes through and just compresses the vocal. So I have a compressor and then another compressor, and it's giving it that really gritty tone. So once you add that to the vocal,
closed in every room, I move slow, can't quite cope with who I see in you.
Sounds awesome. On this microphone, so there's just some frequencies that I don't like, so we definitely have to mess with it. So prior to the EQ,
Shades closed in every room, I move slow. Can't quite cope with who I see in you.
Yeah, and that's just taking out some of those frequencies that I don't like, or I don't like how they sound in there. Adding it to the double, it's the same exact things. We have a de-esser on here, which is just FabFilter Pro DS left at its default setting because it works awesome. From there, we have a little bit of delay going on in the vocals. So this is a quarter note delay, and just with that all on it.
Shades closed in every room, I move slow. Can't.
And then the last thing we are adding is a little bit of reverb. So from there, it's going to be...
Shades closed in every room, I move slow. Can't quite cope with who I see in you.
So it just sounds beautiful. Adding that to the double, we have, again, the de-esser, because we just want to remove those just those S's. We have a doubler on here, so when I have a low or just another track or a double, I want to give it some width so it's not just exactly behind it and it makes it sound fuller. So once you add the doubler to it and you do these two vocals together, it sounds like this.
Shades closed in every room, I move slow. Can't quite cope with who I see in you.
Just adds that thickness to the main vocal that we want. From there, I'm just adding a little distortion just to muddy up that low vocal and make it not stand out so hard. And then I'm also adding some reverb to it. So if I just go through, since that's all the same on all of these tracks, I'm going to keep it that way. These main delays or anything like that that's happening, that's just a change in delay. Like maybe we're doing a half note, or a ping pong or something like that. The lo-fi vocals are a lot of fun because in those sections, which I'll go towards the end, I am using for the lo-fi effect this Howard Benson vocal plugin because it just has this lo-fi option. There's a million ways that you can make it, but when it sounds good and there's literally one button away, convenience is always the options for me. Why work harder? So with these on just by themselves.
Please just only tell me that you'll understand, that you'll stay here in the end. Cause I don't want a match, no, I just need the person that I'd always thought I had. Now you see me through a different colored lens.
Without that effect, it sounds like this.
Please just only tell me that you'll understand, that you'll stay here in the end. Cause I don't want to match no.
Yeah, just adds a really cool effect to it. And then there's a harmony at the end using the same effect. These pre-choruses, so this was cool. So we hadn't really done this before, and Don Broco and Sleep Token were really a inspiration when it came to this part. So by itself, without any of these effects on there, it's a pretty basic vocal part. Altogether, like, we could have used a vocoder, but Jake loves harmonies, so Jake actually made a vocoder harmony. So I mean, like, by themselves it sounds cool. I'll play that for you.
So help me out, swear to God I would take away the doubt.
And those are going behind these main pre-chorus lines. So this is my pre-chorus line before any effect.
So help me out, swear to God I would take away the doubt.
We really wanted to push that British sound right there. And underneath is actually Dan singing.
So help me out, swear to God I would take away the doubt.
All together, like, those all sound really cool.
I would try to watch my mouth. So help me out, swear to God I would take away the doubt.
As cool as that is, and even all together, it just doesn't sell the part without the effects that are being added. So to these, what I'm doing is I'm using this plugin called Little Altar Boy, and I'm dropping the format a little bit, which is making my voice deeper.
So help me out, swear to God I would take away the doubt. I would try to watch my mouth if you would just stay for a while.
And it just like adds something cool. I'm doing the exact same thing to dance. I'm doing the exact same thing to Jake's harmony, and I'm doing the same thing to the other harmony. There is definitely an auto tune that's just cranked on these because that was the effect that we wanted for the part. I know some people are like, oh, they use a bunch of auto tune, but it definitely is like a musical choice at times. And this was definitely one of those parts. And all together, it comes out as.
Swear to God, I would take away the doubt. I would try to watch my mouth if you would just stay for a while. Places only tell me that you'll understand. 'Cause I don't want an answer, I just need the buzz in that.
So we're adding harmony tracks. Harmonies are the same type of things. You know, for these vocals, it's going to basically be the same plugins all the way across. But once you add these harmony tracks in, like me and Jake are big on doing harmonies, obviously from all the stuff that we've done. But they're very important to us. And I mean, just soloed out together.
Please tell me what you want to do. Do you think he could love you like I do? And every year just brings more pain. Thoughts that weigh down any hope I have left in me. And I don't really think that's fair, baby. Yeah, I'm not really sure you care.
So catchy. So catchy. Super proud of those parts. Once we enter our effects vocal, where did this go? So this was like literally just a shh at the beginning of the song. Just to enter the song, and I'm pretty sure that's the only time it happens. Oh, there might be one here. What is this? Yeah, so that's going into the second verse. So those behind it just sound really cool. Yeah, a lot of fun. So once we get into the chorus, this is where like a big bulk of the tracks come from. So we're definitely one of those bands that like when the chorus comes, we want to sell the chorus. It's very important to us. And the harmonies, the harmony choices, all of that. So again, we're using the same plugins on the main vocals and the harmonies and the low octaves, but just the way that they're balanced is where it becomes super important in the parts together. So the chorus by itself is...
Please just don't leave. Tell me that you'll understand, that you'll stay here in the end. 'Cause I don't want a man's, no, I just need the person that I had always thought I had. But now you see me through a different colored lens.
So you got those on there, and then, you know, to really fill everything up, we always put low octaves. So low octaves are just...
Please just don't leave. Tell me that you'll understand, that you'll stay here in the end. 'Cause I don't want a man's, no, I just need the person that I had always thought I had. But now you see me.
They're all they're supposed to do is like really emphasize the chorus. They sound weird because you're trying to do it in line with the chorus and you're not listening to just your low octave. So it kind of like formulates to your own voice, which is weird. But I mean, altogether, those are...
Through a different colored lens, and we both know how it ends. I promise I could change, you promise you won't hurt again. But who are we to play pretend? Oh.
Yeah. Sounds awesome. And then we have Jake's chorus harmonies, and like I said, harmonies are super important to us, and we went with like these very 90s style harmonies, which was a different choice, but it just fit the emo vibe of the song, and just by themselves these harmonies are just so good. So again, we're using all the same type of plugins because simplicity is key. And here's the harmonies.
Please just don't leave. Tell me that you'll understand, that you'll stay here in the end. 'Cause I don't want a mess though, I just need the person that I always thought I had. But now you see me through a different color lens.
And then all together.
And we both know how it ends. I promise I could change, you promise you won't hurt again. But who are we to play pretend? Oh. Salted open wood. Just need the person that I had always thought I had. But now you see me through a different color.
You know, and then this entire song was building and building and building, and it was supposed to build to the end where Jake just does this huge power vocal, and it was written kind of around that moment because we wanted to have this just final hit in the song where it's like it finally gives you that climax and that release of the song that we were building to. And you know, that was really important for us to like sell. So the harmonies change, you know, I switched to the harmonies there where Jake switches in full blast, and I mean just that part just vocally, it just sounds like this.
With different colored lens, and we both know how it ends. I promise I could. You promise you won't hurt again, but who are we to play pretend? Oh. So don't leave, tell me that you'll understand. Will you stay here in the end? I don't wanna match now, I just feel the person that I always thought I had. Now you see me through a different colored lens, and we both know how it ends. I promise you won't hurt again. The person that so don't leave, tell me that you'll understand. Will you stay here in the end? I don't wanna match now, I just need the person that I had always thought I had. Now you see me through a different colored lens, and we both know how it ends.
And then this song wouldn't be complete without Boys of Fall set of oohs in the background. And I do got to give a shout out to Dan because Dan was very instrumental in these oohs going into the background. So basically what I had Jake do was jump in the booth and I had him just record a bunch of oohs, and we did those as harmonies as well. So just that part alone. So they're more like ahs, but altogether behind that, I mean, if I were to just mute the vocals, like if I were to just do everything vocally.
I don't wanna match now, I just need the person that I had always thought I had. Now you see me through a different colored lens, and we both know how it ends. I promise I can change, promise you won't hurt again. Who am I to play pretend? Please don't leave, tell me that you'll understand. That you'll stay here in the end.
And I mean, even with all of that going on, like we're still running into parts where like this chorus at the end, as big as it sounds, it's not driving enough. And this is where we start to add in little things like shakers and tambourines because those make a huge difference in everything. So I'm going to kind of just mute all of these one by one. And this train hit is hilarious to me because it's in the song and it's super heavy, but it fits going into these big parts and it gives that driving. Anybody who's heard a Boys of Fall song has heard this train hit in it. That's literally all it is. I got reverse cymbals coming into that outro with that train hit. You know, just kind of brings that epicness, which goes together with everything. Just gives it that oomph. And then what brings it all together is we have the shaker. And then we have a tambourine. So the tambourine during my chorus part is going halftime. And then once it gets to Jake, we just pick it up full speed because it just has to emphasize that part. And all together. Awesome. And to final out the song, just at the beginning, I have this FX ethereal voice that I just did on a synth. A little MIDI grumble. That is barely there, but it adds this like rising, almost anxiety sounding thing in the background, and it like fit the tone of this emotional vibe in emo because the song is not happy. It's supposed to have this tension to it. And that was very important. And then Jake kind of went through and wrote, a piano part to the whole song that kind of went through. So in the beginning, we've got all of those subtle parts create the entire mix. So yeah, that I mean, as simple as that is, how we mixed Almost Happy. It came out exactly how we were hoping to. It captured that rock emo vibe. The ending just brought this epicness that we were trying to capture. And it was just a lot of fun to do it, and it's very rewarding, and it seems like the reaction has been super positive to it, which we are super stoked about. So I appreciate anybody who has watched this, anybody who has stuck around and listened to our band, anybody who has supported us over the years. You seriously don't know how much it means to us. Yeah. Comment below, subscribe. Let us know if you want to see more videos like this, and catch us at a show near you. Again, I am Mike from Boys of Fall, and thank you for watching. And this was the mix for Almost Happy.